welcome to the Reclaimability Podcast. In this episode, the three components of therapy and the three titans of therapeutic approaches take center stage. From my own experience, in my own work, I recall spending a lot of time trying to understand, first of all, what was going on for me, but also trying to understand how I needed to approach it. And through that, it took me to many different places. It took me obviously into studying it, but it also took me into working with other clinicians and finding a good fit. And a good fit is critically important when it comes to therapy. But what's more important in therapy is to be able to be challenged, but being able to feel safe to do so. And this requires a robust skill set by the clinician and also an openness by the client in order to engage in such therapy. And so this podcast is really highlighting the experience that I've had as a client, but also as a practitioner and also as a teacher and facilitator for clinicians working in this field. Typically, I work from a body-based or somatic approach, but I'm also trained in other things such as cognitive behavioral therapy and psychodynamic theory, which is what we're going to be covering today too. So the more we kind of understand what these are, the more we'll be able to understand what we need and how they fit. Why these things are important is actually because of the structure of therapy itself. Anybody that's ever worked in trauma or wants to work in trauma, they should really look at Trauma and Recovery by Judith Herman. It's kind of like the Bible of the essentials for working in trauma. But quite honestly, if you're working in mental health and you're working clinically, everything has a trauma component. Judith Herman's book that was written in 1998 identifies quite clearly the three stages of trauma recovery. And even if I could just omit trauma, if that was too much for you to think about, just in the three stages of recovery or clinical treatment, I think is just as important. The three stages of trauma recovery she refers to are safety and stabilization, remembrance and mourning, and reconnection and integration. In a perfect world, you go through the stages in order. So stage one, establishing safety and stabilization, and then stage two is remembrance and mourning, which is process. And then three is reconnection and integration with your life. Yeah, and this is basically how do I want to move forward and how do I incorporate the insights that I've learned through processing to be able to do so. And so that's kind of how the three stages work. What's interesting is they never really work 1, 2, and 3 and you're done. It's often a combination. It's like a dance between the three. Ultimately, though, we need one before the other, and then we have to kind of start over when something happens that's new, that suddenly requires us to reorient, go back into stabilization in order to go back into process. So what's important to recognize is there isn't one style of therapy that is good for everything. Each one has its own strengths, and there are some weaknesses to all of them. And so in the work that I've done and working with other clinicians, there's often the debate on one over the other. And so when that happens, we end up losing the value and the skill set of the other. And that always comes at a cost to our clients. So for example, if we look at psychodynamic therapy, it was a focus on the underlying root causes of current challenges, as opposed to sort of managing the symptom of the current situation. The great skill set is it actually is very autonomous and allows the person to discover themselves. And in this sense, psychodynamic therapy is not easily predictable and therefore loses favor within the clinical intervention world. It's quite simple. If we want to be able to evaluate something, we want to be able to measure it in scientific research terms. That means we have to know what the answer is supposed to be, and we have to be able to replicate that every time. And then we can look at somatic work or body-based work as well. And of course, the benefit of that is that we are able to establish safety. We are able to sort of settle the nervous system, as some would describe it, ground, regulate, and also be able to, what I do is, which is recalibrate the nervous system so that it's working more appropriately for the environment. And this is a great benefit, of course, because then you're actually able to feel safe. You're able to feel relaxed from the impact, typically, of your experiences. Cognitive behavioral therapy does have its place as well. Our primary superpower as human beings is our ability to think, and we have the extra ability to think very forward thinking, so thinking deep into the future, and also being able to go back and think in very great detail about the past, and incorporate the two into the present understanding of the situation. And why that's critically important is CBT enables us to actually look at those things in a constructive way and be able to modify them. So to be able to insert a different way of looking at it, so that we can move forward, perhaps in a healthier way. So while all of these modalities have their, we call them perhaps superpowers, they're great strengths. It's important to recognize too that as a practitioner, we have to be aware that the strengths aren't the everything of the therapy. So being aware that if we simply focus on the self, for example, and if we focus on the relationship we're having with our client, we can deepen the relationship. We can feel really good. We can explore the self, and we can sort of go into the space of just self-reflection, deep thought around the self, etc. But it may not be as constructive in moving forward in applying it to our daily life, or perhaps even as safe, without other components in it to be able to sort of further understand perhaps where the self is coming from, where the developmental stages were impacted, and also our conceptualization of what we're actually looking for in the future. Sometimes looking at ourselves is sometimes the problem. Is if we only have ourself as the barometer, then we're unable to take in new perspectives. And without taking in new perspectives, it's very difficult to gain insight, which is required for change. And somatic work or body-centered work is very powerful in creating safety, but oftentimes what can happen is both the clinician as well as the client get stuck in the feeling of feeling safe in the clinical environment. And so what ends up happening is we could spend years simply going to a session and getting the reward of feeling safe, but actually not being able to incorporate it out in the outside world. So the therapy session seems like a success. The practitioner sees the client as always coming in, perhaps even regulated, feeling motivated, feeling calm. And so it looks like a success, and the client comes in excited, looking forward to the session, to go back into adjusting their nervous system and going back into following their body and feeling and doing what feels good. And all of these things are wonderful, but if it doesn't have a forward motion, like how do I use this moving forward in my everyday life, then the effect becomes lost. And the intention is to have that built-in ability in ourselves to be able to do that in our environment. So without that, we're simply just going into therapy and getting a quick hit, a dose, without the ability to create it ourselves, which can be problematic. And then, of course, with CBT as a practitioner, it's easier to follow. There's drop-down menus. There's an understanding, a path of flow. This is what healthy looks like. This is what unhealthy looks like. This is how you identify it, and these are the options that you use to correct the thinking. And so it can be quite simple for a practitioner to be able to sort of follow the drop-down menu and apply that as their therapy. But in that, there's a loss of what the practitioner actually has to provide, which is themselves, which is their own human experience, bringing that into the therapeutic relationship. And as a client, what can often happen too is a sort of just give me the Coles Notes version. Either it's well received, in other words, just tell me what I have to do to fix things, because I'm just gonna take that drop down menu. I'm just going to do it, and I'm going to apply it, and then I can just be done with this stuff. And so what ends up happening is that they will apply it, they will try to apply it, But what ends up happening is it doesn't quite fit, because what's missing is the self, and what's missing is the regulation to be able to be truly focused on what I need to do, how I need to adjust, what needs to be corrected in order for me to feel well in my environment. And so it's like I can try it for a bit, it seems to work, but then I'm exhausted. I'm completely exhausted from trying this so much, and then I'm now I just kind of give up. And this is because a lot of the other work hasn't been done already, which is the safety stabilization and also the understanding of the connection with the self. Or it could be completely rejected. Clients have reported when using CBT that they feel completely disconnected from the practitioner. It's the practitioner imposing on them. And so what they feel is that they actually lose their autonomy by sort of saying, okay, I'm in your hands. You tell me what to do. I have now no agency in this. I'll just do what I'm told, or I don't feel like I can even trust you because we haven't even established that trust yet. So then the relationship and the work itself is jeopardized because there hasn't been that establishment of stabilization, and there hasn't been the connection with self in that relationship. By integrating these three components into a therapeutic process, into the relationship of therapy, you're providing a holistic approach. And the holistic approach means that it's flexible, it's dynamic, it has the ability to move in and create safety, create curiosity around the individual self, but also able to glean perspectives from a different view, and then having a strong action plan to move forward. All of those things are a beautiful soup combination of psychodynamic therapy, somatic or body-based therapy, and cognitive behavioral therapy. Putting them together the right way and being able to mix them. And I say it's like a soup because it's not one after the other after the other. It does not work that way. It's a delicate dance between the three. You may be going into safety and stabilization, and as you've done that, you may be then you're venturing into the self and curiosity and moving in a psychodynamic way. But then there may be something that comes up, which is a barrier, which is why we actually go to therapy. I can't overcome this. And that means you may have to move back into body-based or somatic work, and then moving back into perhaps very quickly into psychodynamic, but then also incorporating CBT. It's like, well, why is this important to you? How is this impacting your life? How would you like to be able to change that? So it's moving seamlessly through all three of these stages, which will allow the most robust therapeutic experience that one can offer and one can receive. So that's what I've got for you today. I hope this was helpful, and if it wasn't helpful for you, perhaps it will be helpful for someone else. Until next time, I look forward to growing and being curious with you. Unlike public institutions or nonprofit organizations, the Atlanta Group and Trauma Training Center uses membership contributions to enable innovative and independent research, publication, program development, and delivery without the bias or influence of outside investors or donators. Got a topic or question? Be part of the contribution by reaching out. We may feature it on one of our episodes. I look forward to learning, growing, and being curious with you.